finding out about this, the electoral procedure. I'm not very well familiar with it, but I'm really looking forward to talking with you. And welcome very much to Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome you.
I'm glad to see Manhattan has such a facility.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is.
It's a thing. It's all across the country. They've got this. It's a great thing. Maybe you become interested in becoming a producer here. We might be able to talk you into that possibly. But let me introduce you. Let me introduce you first. All right. And I want to welcome very much to Conversations. Our guest is Christopher, or Chris Strunk, and he's got a very, very interesting resume and background. It's being topped in a certain sense in the modern experience, June of 2008, by his running for the 18th Congressional Senate District. And he's going to be talking about that and other matters. And Chris, welcome very much to Conversations.
Thank you.
We have a mutual friend in that wonderful Carl Pearson.
Yes.
Give my best regards.
We are bottom up together.
All right, very good. So let's just start at the beginning in a certain sense. Where were you born and raised, that sort of thing, and then we're going to get in. You've got a number of issues that you're very taken with, but share just a little bit about your own.
I was born in Manhattan during the big snowfall in January of '47. And I was between Florida and Westchester and back to New York through the military for a few years, and I graduated out of high school in Westchester.
Were you an officer or enlisted man?
No, I enlisted. They were taking everybody, and I enlisted in the Air Force, and half my family went in at the same time. It was either that or go to Canada. So
right.
And a lot of my friends did.
That would have been Vietnam time, or no?
Yes, I'm a Vietnam era veteran.
Did you see action?
Well, they kept on. I was in a good specialty, so they kept on asking me where I wanted to go.
What was the specialty?
Air weather. I was
air
in
weather.
Upper air research.
A lot of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I drew weather maps, and I got involved in my interest in geography in that sense.
That's what I did my doctor work in geography.
Well, I was just an inch away from graduation. My father convinced me to come work in his architectural office, and and I worked for him for about 6 years or so in New York City, and New York City architect.
Architectural design, or what?
Well, he was a full-rounded architect.
Yeah,
He was involved in hospital architecture.
Okay.
In partnership for 16 years with Max Vogel, Vogel and Strunk, and I worked for him for about 5 years. He was involved in Jamaica Hospital, putting that together.
Okay.
And that was his, and they worked on that for almost 15 years.
That's quite a long time.
Well,
were you like apprenticing as an architect?
Yes, I was. Same time I was going to City College.
In architecture?
School of Architecture.
Okay, good, yeah.
And from there, the bottom fell through in New York City, and it went
70s?
in 75.
75 was a mess.
And William Rogers was supposed to do a bond offering, and he screwed it all up. You know, he was Nixon's man, so he screwed it up, and we didn't meet the window of getting the bond in before New York City went into the control board, and the hospital didn't get built for another 15 years after that.
Oh boy, yeah. They had things down in Independence Plaza and downtown. They had some holdups, and it was around then that somebody said "drop dead" to New York. Was that President Ford?
That actually he didn't say it in quite that way, but the press said it. The press is always good at saying things which people don't say.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, that's true.
I went into construction management. That's where the money was. And,
right, I guess so, yeah.
And I worked with, I was involved with a number of architectural firms doing construction management on Woodhull Hospital in Brooklyn, which was my first reintroduction to Brooklyn. My family lived in Brooklyn Heights in my early years. And so that I went from there to work for the state full-time, and worked for nearly 10 years for the Facilities Development Corporation, and worked for Cuomo. I was the guy that closed Willowbrook.
Oh, really?
Yes, I was the one who did that. And,
that was a major thing?
And the reason they picked me is I was the only one not politically connected. So if something went wrong, they could give me a bullet in the back of the head when nobody would miss me. But everything was fine, and certainly it came in budget and hit the mark. And it was. And I feel that there
was a major documentary about that led to that.
Yeah, Geraldo Rivera. You know that he could have gone.
There was somebody else other than Geraldo Rivera. He was there, yeah, but there was somebody else who did an artful thing or something. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Well, no, I did, but certainly
called attention to the existence of it that hadn't been realized.
Well, there's an issue involved in the breakup of the Social Security Fund. Because I was working with the very people who understood how the fund worked, and certainly John Kennedy started his career in Congress breaking the fund up.
Okay.
And the Social Security Fund was broken into components so that, and you took it out of mental hygiene, and you separate those who are mentally ill from those who are developmentally disabled. And as soon as Rockefeller was able to do that, they were able to use the Social Security Fund to do long-term bonding on building facilities.
Really?
Yes.
Huh?
So that the Social Security Fund built the entire disabled facilities. And anyway, I was involved in the field end, and then I went into the front office and did management or design development. And then I went from there to do construction in Brooklyn, doing housing.
Okay.
And I was really out of my own pocket, so that with a city loan, and I crossed swords with the Democrats who in other words, you don't try to get involved in poverty in New York City unless you let the Democrats tell you who's impoverished.
I see.
Yes,
you're running as a Republican, no?
Republican because they haven't had a Democratic mayor in such a long time that the Republicans are all out of the Democratic camp. Giuliani was a Democrat. He was a liberal organizer for McGovern. Certainly, Mayor Bloomberg was a Democrat.
He was a Democrat, and he ran as a Republican. Right?
Denny Farrell had made a deal, and it probably ended up in crossing swords with Clarence Norman, who was... Clarence Norman was the head of the Brooklyn Democratic Club, who was just put in prison for a few years just last year.
Okay.
And that he was upstaging Denny Farrell, who really runs the city. And,
is that right? Okay, this is inside stuff. I don't
Percy
know.
Sutton and the World War II
Percy
flyers.
Sutton, the chairman.
Right. So
he was one. You knew Percy Sutton. You know Percy Sutton?
I know certainly of him, but I've never met him. But certainly he is still a power in the city of New York.
He's a wonderful man. He's out of Texas.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the family was an undertaking, which is a real steady business.
It's very steady.
Yeah, very steady.
Never run out of customers.
But he wanted to be in. He wanted to be in broadcast. I like the man a lot. He wanted to be in broadcasting. He was a young man down in Texas. He walked around with a corn cob. And he was saying, "This is Percy Sutton, and I'm coming to you on Power Station." When he was a kid, using, and then he became.
Well, he was with the Red Tails.
Yeah, what's that?
That was the flying unit in Italy that was running fighter protection for our bombers.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh yeah, the flyers.
Yeah.
But in any case, I got to know Stuy. I lived there for 10 years. My family lived with me for a while there, and I've got a 13-year-old son. My wife is a Russian doctor, and she educated me really as to some of the fine details of the Soviet Union and the breakup, and she used to read me all the newspapers.
She's from Russia.
She is Soviet. Soviet.
Have
Siberia.
Have you spent time there in Russia? You're not familiar?
I didn't have a security clearance. They wouldn't let me go when I wanted to go, and because of the Cold War. But when I had an opportunity, I didn't go because I didn't have clearance to do that. So.
Didn't have clearance to go and do it. But you were working. Okay, right. That's interesting. Yeah, my daughter married a fellow from St. Petersburg. But they're in theater and everything like that. But it's quite a country. And the CIA, I think I hear you talking about clearance and that kind of. The CIA, with all their research and so forth, missed the implosion of the Soviet Union.
Well, look, Daniel Patrick Moynihan made it quite clear in '79 that the guns and butter issue was really putting them into the drink, and certainly the entire Cold War was orchestrated. Truman came in out of the dark. You know, he was part of the Pendergast machine.
Yeah,
was really usurped. He was usurped going into
yeah, I was closing the door. Yeah.
My take on the entire Cold War was that it was a great fundraising operation so that the military-industrial complex could do what they want on both sides of the Atlantic.
That's the one Mr. Eisenhower warned us against.
Well, what he did, because he was trying to raise money for the highway program, was he originally said it was the Congressional Military-Industrial Complex, and he struck that out.
He did?
That's right. It's in his
I thought it was military-industrial academic.
He had said, because it's Congress who runs the military through budgeting, and they're the ones who pocket the money from big corporations. They're the ones who are really profiteering. And then Truman was involved in actually uncovering some of those.
Yeah, Mr. Pendergast wasn't exactly rosy clean.
Well, that was an entirely different story.
But
he, as a congressman, when the fellow who was the Secretary of Agriculture,
Faubus?
Under FDR. Yeah. Anyway, Truman, when he got chosen for the third go-around for vice presidency. Henry Wallace.
Henry Wallace, yes, sure, he was a progressive.
So that, right. So, but certainly that Truman, before he replaced Henry Wallace, essentially had uncovered huge amounts of scandal, which really rivaled the level of scandal that's going on right now in Iraq with the profiteering going on.
Yeah, it's hard. You mean around the
World War
interstate?
II. This is World War II.
This is the interstate system of highways that I heard you talking about, or about the whole wartime thing?
Truman had, as a congressman, uncovered corruption in contracting during World War II.
Okay, yeah.
And he moved into Henry Wallace's position when Henry Wallace tried to run for president, and gave FDR the boot. But I just wanted to do the parallel that Truman came in cold after FDR's death.
I know he was really,
and that he did not really have the handle on what the FDR's notion of the American century should have been.
Right.
And that if I am quite. It's clear to me that Truman had a handler through his entire
He had to
administration.
have
right. And the Dulles brothers were poisoned, as far as I'm concerned. Avery Dulles, who was a Jesuit, by the way,
we want to talk about that. Yeah,
just passed away just a little while ago.
Okay.
But the whole relationship of the Dulleses to the Jesuits specifically managed Truman. And Truman, who was led into setting up the CIA, after the Bay of Pigs, Truman wrote a letter saying, "This is not what I set it up for. It should be disbanded immediately."
Bay of Pigs is 62.
Right. And Truman essentially condemned the whole thing as the CIA was not what he saw was not what it was being used for, and he wrote a letter to that effect.
But Truman wasn't president in 62.
No, but he was up on his high horse, and he said, "I didn't set this up to do the following."
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So certainly
he
Truman
was very unconnected, I think, Roosevelt. They had a marvelous documentary about Truman on the McCulloch had written and everything like that. And nobody thought he had any chance to win that 1948 election.
Against Stuy.
Against Stuy, a very charming New York City Republican. And he did.
Well,
it was the shock of the century, in a sense, that he was able to do that. Nobody gave him a chance to win. But
look, the Democrats have always had a very tremendous vote fraud machine, and they still do today.
Do the Republicans have a corrupt vote machine?
They're not people. They don't know how to handle people. They're into money. They're into pushing the numbers around. And then certainly.
But there can be some corruption and things like that going on where money's being pushed around.
Not in New York City.
Not in New York City. That's interesting to me. I don't know. I'm learning here. Yeah.
Elizabeth Holtzman, in a series of cases. Through grand jury, had uncovered huge amount of fraud in Brooklyn, and it's still going on. And Hines refuses to crack down on it. So,
who is Hines?
Charles Hines. He's the DA of Brooklyn.
DA current.
Right.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. Right.
So,
are you trying to say, in a certain sense, that the Democrats are corrupt and the Republicans are not?
What I'm saying is that the Democrats are hands-on in people handling, and the Republicans are austere and prefer to handle the bigger issues, like whether or not the law is going to count everybody that's supposed to be counted and that sort of thing. But in terms of putting together
Have you always been a Republican or not? No. Okay. You've been all over the lot.
I worked for Cuomo. You didn't get a job with Cuomo unless you became a Democrat.
Okay, right.
So as soon as I left the employ, I quit the Democrats. I saw where the bodies were buried, and I was very fed up with what I was seeing.
But
in the
you were
state of
pretty
New York.
you were pretty involved in politics.
Not really.
No, you were in the you were building and you were architecting.
Right,
and, that
and
kind
it's
of
very
thing.
hard to get anything done in New York City.
Is
Because
it? Is it?
Oh,
A lot
geez.
gets done every time you go out. There's another big building goes up and
but
so forth.
see,
I mean, it's really dynamic.
There's a lot
it
of
seems.
grease. A lot of money greases the skids.
There must be. I've often thought of that. There has to be. Yeah.
For instance,
is
with
that
the latest,
true all over the country, or is New York particularly egregious, or what do you think, or the world for that matter?
well, in order to make an omelet, you got to break the eggs.
I've heard that many a time. Yeah.
But certainly the latest thing with the cranes, you know, it's everything's money, money, money. Rush, 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 rush. Time is money. Blah blah blah. The point is that they've moved the cranes from. They used to be built at the center. They used to be placed at the center of the building. So as the building went up, it got braced. Now they've got it outboard, so that
why?
Because it's easier to lift.
It's
easier to lift.
They're trying to get economy or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah.
10,000 a day.
But that would be the case whether the person was Democrat or Republican, wouldn't it? I mean, they're all trying to get.
When was the last time we had a Democrat in mayor?
Yeah, it doesn't happen in New York.
Because there
City,
is no work. There is no stable. They don't create a stable. Everything's top down. And of course, they're very willing to put Republicans in because there are no Republicans bottom up.
In New York, yeah.
No, it's all top down.
Okay.
It's all top down.
And
And
that's interesting. Yeah.
New York City, as it was put together by Wagner. I knew Hewlin Jack, who was a friend of mine. When he passed, he said to me they wouldn't have been able to do the big projects like the Verrazano Bridge. No, I'm talking about the Verrazano Bridge period, where Hewlin Jack was the Manhattan borough president. You had the 5 borough presidents. Each one of them had a budget. They were able to run local government. You knew where they lived, and you could knock on their door and get things done. But under Wagner, it was all consolidated. The boroughs lost their budgets, and they're not able to get things done the way that Hewlin Jack had done as the borough president of Manhattan, where they were able to figure out what they all needed in building a project for New York. Now nothing gets done.
Well, you say nothing gets done. There was a lot done in the time. It was Moses, back in the 30s.
The bridges,
and they got the roads, and they got things, and he would just move mountains and everything to get things done.
Well,
use eminent domain, all kinds of, and he got a lot done.
Well, he caused a lot of problems.
He did, but he got a lot done too.
Well, so did Hitler.
So I was going to say Hitler.
Yeah, Hitler and his Autobahn. What he did to the Bronx.
Autobahn, that was great.
What he did to the Bronx, we will never recover from.
Robert Moses?
Right.
Yeah. What did he did? I mean, the Cross
Bronx Expressway.
Okay.
It destroyed the Bronx.
It did, you think, right?
Absolutely.
But doesn't it help?
It will never recover.
Doesn't it help get the trucks moving on time?
Look, what we needed is a tunnel system. We needed rail. We've neglected our rail. We've neglected the enormity, the size of New York State from Buffalo. Buffalo is the gentleman was on just before you. He's from Buffalo.
Yeah, right.
We've gone to near 900,000 to half of that, less than half. They can't even plow their own roads now. And when they get snow, they get snow.
That's snow, real snow up there.
Right, that's snow, lake effect and everything else.
Yeah.
So the point is that there's been a tremendous neglect of New York State. It's no longer the Empire State, and that it's not even the Empire State. You know, there's a need to look at connecting the western part of the state, which is closer to Ohio than it is in Pennsylvania, than it is to New York City. And New York City is controlling the assembly through its being oversized. The state constitution is clear on that any entity which is a home rule entity, and that the Bronx and the Brooklyn, they're not home rule anymore. They lost that under Wagner. So that New York City essentially has control of the minority vote. They can control the votes in both the Assembly and the Senate. And the Constitution, as it was written in the late 1890s, was written in such a way before computers, so that no one entity could control the state. And that has been abandoned with a vengeance in the last 30 years. New York City is too big for its britches. I am wanting to see Brooklyn with home rule. It's nearly the third largest city in the country. We don't have Brooklyn.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So almost 2.6 million people.
What's the largest? Manhattan?
Manhattan's pretty big, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, no, New York City as an entirety has got 8.5, 8.6.
But Brooklyn, a lot of souls live out there. That's a very,
almost
very...
2.6 million people.
That many? Yeah, okay,
That's
right, okay, yeah.
And it's becoming the bedroom community for Manhattan. Nobody can afford to live in Manhattan anymore. So I'm pursuing the state constitution now for about 8 years.
Okay.
And that it's become a nullity. It's been through the bribes and the various unfunded mandates from the federal government. The legislature is always walking around hat in hand looking for federal handouts. And everything is controlled by the crisis management from unfunded mandates. And certainly Daniel Patrick Moynihan was discussing this in terms of that New York City paying more than it receives. Yeah. And that I certainly agree with him on that. And I'd like to get a reversal on the damage that's been done by New York City to the entirety of the state. It's destroyed New York City, New York State. It's taking over the watersheds. It's pushing people off their property.
Well, they wanted to do, yeah.
Look, the Delaware, the water basin, the drainage basement, the Delaware system, the Susquehanna system, the Hudson system. New York City, working with the Army Corps of Engineers since 1954, has been pretty much the tail wagging the dog. And that it is, as a city, under the state constitution, it's unconstitutional. It's too big. One of the boroughs must get home rule again. And I say it should be Brooklyn.
What does that mean, home rule?
That means we have our own elected representation. That means that we control our own budget. We have a say in the way that the government is run. We have absolutely no say the way that the city is run.
We got a borough president, Marty Moskowitz.
Yeah, he likes to wear hula skirts and run around being the buffoon.
Is that what you feel of him?
I
right?
know of him.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, you think, but he's very popular with a lot of people, right?
He greases the skids. Yes.
Well, don't political figures all do a measure of that? What about Mr. Bloomberg? He's mayor of the whole city.
Bloomberg has control of the budget. Marty Markowitz has no budget. It's a ornamental position, and he's got plenty of time running around like a buffoon.
What about Scott Stringer?
Scott he's been a hard worker that I've known him. I lived in northern Manhattan for a while, and certainly he's come up the hard way. He was an organizer. And, but Marty Markowitz was my senator out in Bed-Stuy. So
really?
I know him. And but there was never a return phone call to me when I had any problems. Stephen Solar's returned a phone call. Other people returned phone calls.
What were you doing that they would call you? Why would they call you? And what were you doing that would have you talking?
I was doing battle with the Democratic Party. So
you were doing battle with the Democratic Party.
Right.
And why would they call you? You said they didn't call you.
Well, I was spending my life savings, $600,000 in the city of New York.
All right.
And I refused to give out payola to the damn Democrats.
You refused to give payola to the Democrats,
right.
And that payola is what helps grease the whole machinery?
You bet.
You do.
It's all about money. This is one of the most corrupt cities in the country.
That's going some. Chicago's pretty good, isn't it? You know, I mean, it's got a reputation.
Chicago is
Ames, Iowa, compared to New York.
Chicago's runner-up.
Oh, you're runner-up, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, but
we're an international city. Chicago, although it's got the Chicago Board of Trade,
yes, indeed,
is very important, extremely important.
Yeah,
but that. You know, in terms of production and the way the Chicago Board of Trade works, that is really at the center of the strength of the country. But that the Wall Street and the crowd who are, you know, the oil markets that are run here in New York City and in London, why are they here? You know, why? There's a whole level of international intrigue, which is not serving the people of Brooklyn.
Okay, very good. And you want to serve the people of Brooklyn.
Yeah,
you're going to run as a Republican, as it happens.
Well, because there are no Republicans. There's 140,000 Democrats, and there's lucky if we can find 7,500 Republicans, and most of them have gray hair.
That's why you've got this graphic off to the left of you here now. Maybe the camera can, in full course of time, come in on this, and it's a little bit, got a lot of data on there.
This is the Red Hook and the Army
right,
terminal.
That's over there. Yeah, and, Red Hooks. Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly there's this is composed of portions of 8 assembly districts against the mandate of the state constitution that says all assembly districts must be wholly within the Senate district. You're lucky to find any assembly district in the state of New York.
How and why did they get around that?
Well, it's a longer program than...
Okay,
but
maybe
certainly,
we didn't go into it. Yeah,
I have a court case before Judge Kahn since 2004. I have a mandate from Second Circuit to get a 3-judge panel. And they're just, you know...
The law can work very slowly.
It's not the law. It has nothing to do with the law. And we're lucky, you know, the law is something we're talking about, but essentially it's the angst and it's the hubris, the pure hubris of the judiciary. There's nothing running the judiciary. You can't embarrass a judge. It's impossible. So anyway, I went to Second Circuit. They mandated that he do something in 2005. He's been sitting on a motion since 2005.
Really? That's a long
sitting
time.
on it. I'm about to go up to Judge Sotomayor and talk with Sotomayor at the Second Circuit. So it's a long issue. I've been at it since '99. And we're in line for a constitutional convention in this state once every 20 years.
Really?
And
I didn't know that took place.
Mandatory, once every 20 years. It's 2016.
Okay.
And we can rewrite the Constitution. Now, we can't do it.
Have they been meeting that over the history
every
of
20
the
years?
state?
We tried to do it.
Did they ever make any big changes, or?
38 was the last big change.
Okay, right.
1938.
Yeah.
And
took a depression to get it going, huh?
Well, it took reworking Congress. Certainly, Mayor LaGuardia had come back, become mayor at that point, and he, as a congressman first, you know, he came back and had an impact on the way that the changes that were made, that were done. But that we haven't had a constitutional convention of any significance.
We have one coming up what year again?
2016.
Put it on your calendars everywhere.
Right,
260, we can get things right, huh?
Right.
Maybe, yeah, okay.
The state is in dire shape. It's in desperate shape. They're upstate. They're in a terrible
I understand
depression.
there's a lot of
terrible depression.
depression.
And I pin it all on New York City. All of it.
You do.
Absolutely all of it.
Spell it out quick. Why?
Well, they're controlling the budget process.
Okay.
They're too big. They have too many votes. There is a home rule
New
requires.
York City is too big.
Yeah, it's too big.
Yeah.
Against the state constitution. It's against it can only have, according to the state constitution, 1/3 of the state senators. That way, they cannot control the constitutional convention, and they cannot have 1/2 of the state senators with the adjoining either Nassau or Westchester.
And do they meet those figures, or are those figures out of whack now?
No, they're totally out of whack. It's
really?
too big. Too big. Too big.
Well, then you were saying it wasn't much of a city, but it really, a lot of people, Mr. Giuliani used to say, this is the capital of the world. And a lot of people see New York as the capital. And everybody comes here, and we got 189 countries represented, and the people that make up the communities of New York.
A lot of
and
people,
it's a hell of a beautiful city in lots of ways.
We have a good
moments
shopping.
of one's life. Yeah.
We have euros. We accept euros hanging in the, okay, the point is the Federal Reserve has done more to change the face of New York State than any other institution going.
Really?
It reviews the 30-year spending plans on long-term bonds.
Okay.
It affects our housing, and it is an instrument not of any federal interest. It's an interest of private banks internationally. It's an interest of big investors, Bank of America. It's the interest of European bankers.
Does it make Does it make a difference if Federal Reserve is a thing of the banking industry? It's a private bank.
Organization.
It's a private bank with
fiat
fiat money.
With the federal government. It's private.
Yeah, I know.
It's got members.
Unlike central banks in many political entities of the planet,
which have national interest in mind. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
The Federal Reserve has no national interest in mind.
Major issue in terms of the way the world is, the country and the world is organized is on that, and you're also got a number.
We're fighting a war in Iraq
because
Saddam Hussein in June of 2001 decided to do his oil for food business using euros. He took us off the dollar.
Yeah, he was going to do that.
He took the oil off the dollar. That's why we went there, because the Saudis said, we don't want this man doing business.
They went to the euro? They went to the euro, or where'd they go?
Saddam Hussein went to the euro.
I didn't know he had. I thought he was
June of 2001. That's why everybody freaked out. And certainly Greenspan, who had just finished pumping the dollar into an oblivion in the 2000 the millennium. But look, I'm saying that the Federal Reserve affects us in a very negative way because it's top down, and that people need a bottom-up structure within the state constitution. We have a bottom-up structure. We've got towns which compose counties, which then compose and send people to the state legislature. That has been taken away from us.
You want to win a seat so that you'll be in the assembly, is that it?
Senate.
Senate, in the Senate, state Senate.
The Senate. Yes.
Now, is that something that is doable as a Republican, or is it a thing?
We're petitioning. I'm certainly the way that the election laws.
And what is your appeal? What is your appeal to the people that make up? And you're trying to even understand the makeup of the whole community that you're running in.
I understand the community quite well. I've lived in it for over 10 years.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've left a large portion of my own investment in the community.
Okay.
And I had my own block association. I certainly knew all the luminaries. And that.
So you got a lot of friends.
Well, I've got people who know who I am. Let's put it that way.
And to know you is to love you.
for people.
Listen, I'll tell you something, Strunk. You're going to get everything that's coming to you.
That's absolutely true.
Good, and that's good,
huh? Yeah. Well, look, I believe I'm a gardener, so I believe you reap what you sow, and certainly. I had 8,000 square feet of raised bed garden in my community.
No kidding.
I had 4,000. I was working with Cornell on that, so I know about gardening.
Yeah.
And I know about planting seeds.
And you know a lot about the way the world works. And you know a lot.
Unfortunately, I prefer to stay home at this point. You know, I spent a lot of time.
I know that world, and it ain't good.
Right, it's not good. I spent time in North Africa and Central America, in the Mideast,
if I may? Where?
In Libya.
In Libya. Well, you've been in Libya for a long time?
Well, I was there during the revolution. And,
you were there in '69?
'69, yeah.
Were you really there?
I was one of the last 3 or 4 airplanes out of there.
No fooling. Were you diplomatic or business?
Military.
I
was in air weather.
Oh, you were in air weather. You were Wheelus Air Force Base?
Right,
yeah, they closed that down as soon as he took over. Yeah.
That's Mussolini's racetrack.
I've been there about 12 times.
Beautiful sailing.
Beautiful sailing. Great, and I like him very much, as it happens. I think I may be the only person that does. I think Muammar Gaddafi is really ahead of the curve in terms of what the world needs.
And I was there. I saw the whole thing. There were 3 sets of signs. There was English at top, there was Italian, and then there was Arabic, right?
Yeah.
First thing he did. And, of course, King Idris didn't allow any of the girls to go to school, and that they were forbidden from going to school. So the first thing he did, and all the Sicilians ran the place. You know,
and Maltese, or
the Sicilians ran the place, going back to Hannibal. Okay, so the point, though, is that first thing Gaddafi did was to take down the English and the Italian sign, and everybody couldn't read Arabic, so that and he had mandated the girls go to school.
Yeah, he was progressive that way. Yeah, but that's.
Well, I don't know if you can call him progressive. That's the least.
Well, I would. I tell you the truth. It's the only.
That's the least
I don't want to go off on a tangent because there's a lot of things. I want to talk.
Harold.
But I'll just mention. I think it may be that he is to the modern world as the United States of America was to feudal Europe. Well, he's ahead of the curve in terms of what the future requires, and we're caught up with institutions as time has passed. But I don't want to get into all that with him.
He was educated at Sandhurst.
Was he? I didn't realize
yes,
that.
Sandhurst.
Yeah.
He is part of the whole Masonic movement.
Okay.
All right. Let's really get into what the Sicilian were doing there, what the Vatican relationship was.
I think it'd be good if we talked about the Jesuits a little.
Well,
you think that's
you got into it. You brought up Gaddafi, right? I mean, Arm & Hammer was the only one left with any oil wells.
I did a program with Arm & Hammer.
I called my father. I said to my father, you got to buy Occidental Petroleum, right? This is, you know, and they could have gotten it for nothing. You know, this is Al Gore's family's operation, Occidental Coal, and then they became Occidental Petroleum. But certainly the ambassador without portfolio, which was Arm & Hammer, very tight with the Masonic order and the Catholic Church.
He was very heavily invested in Libya. in oil, Occidental Petroleum.
Well, he bought it as a fluke. But what Occidental? I knew the oil drillers, the wildcatters.
Yeah, wildcatters.
Who would go out on the desert for 2 weeks at a time with machine guns and all sorts of stuff. You know, it was it was just like the Wild West there.
It was like Indiana Jones. Yeah.
It was absolutely the Wild West.
Yeah, yeah.
And I saw that before and after.
You're there what year now?
69.
16. You were there of the Revolution. You were at Wheelus outside.
I was before
Tripoli.
and after.
Yeah.
So but the point is that
I hitchhiked through there in 1957.
It was safe.
Across the North Africa.
It was safe.
Libyans treated me great. They were about the poorest people in the world then. They were right down there with Haiti. And now they've gone through a major change. But
Bedouin,
yeah. Well, yeah, but I think he's ahead of the curve. But that's another thing. But you also have a great interest in the large picture of the way the world operates, and you've got some thoughts about the Jesuits, and you've got some of these things that
I'm probably the only one willing to talk about it, and for a reason. The country's not doing so well.
This country?
It's not doing so well.
Okay.
This country was founded by Masons. You know, everybody who signed the Declaration of Independence was a Mason, except for one man. And that...
Wait a minute, is that true?
That is absolutely the case.
Okay, now spell out the significance of that. And I would, if I could, bring up another thing that I talk about every once in a while. And there's a man, a serious historian, I forget his first name, Edward Harriman. And he wrote a book called How the Scots Invented the Modern World and Everything in It. And so I'm wondering, is there a connection?
Discuss this. I have an emblem of the Scottish and the York's Rite Mason.
I don't know.
And I don't know, but
well, I'll put it here.
You had mentioned that to me.
This is just the Masonic. So spell us out this thing about the Masonic and the Scots, because there were a great number of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were Scots. Hume, Adam Smith, steam engine, capitalism, the modern world was largely a part of the Scottish, Carnegie. It was largely a result of the Scottish Enlightenment more than the
they got worked over pretty heavy from the British or the
So what we're showing on the screen now is a thing that has to do with Freemasonry. I've heard this before. Tell me about Freemasonry. Talk to me about Freemasonry and where it stands, and tie it into the Jesuit influence upon the world's leadership or the world's society.
when you look at the long-term effect of the world, those that are left standing with really are the ones who control global matters. I mean,
the Fundi.
The Fundi.
Yeah, or the old fund.
Out of Italy. But look, there was an interesting book just written to give you a sense of the sweep of history.
It'd be good to get a sense of that if you can, a legitimate one.
Let me try to do it, because we're into a very, it's sort of a broad and sweeping issue here.
Yes, indeed.
If you look at the relationship of the temple building of Masons, they were actually Masons who built the temples, who knew construction, who knew engineering, who knew how to build things. They became a very tightly knit group who kept the knowledge of trigonometry, if you will, and of building.
And other matters.
A lot of other matters.
Yes.
But that certainly, you're not going to build weapons of war without a Mason. You're not going to build weapons, your castles, your protection. They became the tools of monarchy.
Okay, and the monarchs were in control.
And of a dynasty.
Dynastic states.
Dynastic states, right.
1,000 years it held after Rome.
Okay, and bringing it into the time of Christ, they played a very important role in Rome, because they were building, wherever Rome was, they built everything. You look at the magnificent edifices of the aqueducts and this is quite amazing. I've seen so much of that in Turkey and when I was there, and but the Masons, you have a Christian church, the Orthodox church, and you have a Gnostic relationship around Constantine and the machinations, right, and the unfolding of what we now know of Islam, And Joseph Campbell did a series of very interesting books. Oh,
Wasn't he wonderful?
He did a series of books, 1966, which go into the Oriental, the Occidental, and the creative mythology. I prefer not to get into the structure of that, but Masonry was a global enterprise.
Okay.
It swept through business and through education and through every aspect of getting things done, as it does today. You don't hear too much about it.
Okay.
Its competition was the Gnostic Church, and was the Templar order, who essentially kept an eye on Jerusalem, which was the center of both Islam and Christianity.
Right, you are.
They became the power to be dealt with in Europe, the Templar order.
The Knights Templar.
The Knights Templar. Matter of fact, they became the Cistercian order and the Trappist order.
And these were all powerful forces.
They were they had all of the riches, all the gold and the riches that were taken from the tombs to prevent it from being looted, basically. And they had
they
knowledge.
looted it before the looters could
exactly.
get there. Yeah, not the first time it's happened.
And put it in the safe place, and then they leveraged it to essentially put monarchy in hock. And Bernard Clairvaux, who was the leader and was the most feared Templar, who was the banker. So they were all bankers.
When did he come?
Was it 1,000?
Roughly.
Was it 1200
or something?
I'm not sure
I'm not sure.
of the date, but it's
okay,
like,
I was just curious.
But certainly it was before the Crusades.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And he was put to death, and because the king of France at that point, who owed a huge amount of money. And at that point, the Templars controlled the Vatican. And we're talking about post-Charlemagne, post-Dark Ages. And
I heard you say before Constantine. That's 3,000. That's when they went Christian, or he did.
Well, it was the time of Al-Farabi and the various Islamic Avicenna and the great Islamic thinkers.
Oh, that's later.
Right.
Okay.
And they were very much in contact with the Templars, so that there was, Jerusalem was at the center of their concerns.
Yeah.
So in any case, the Templar order got put away and essentially were relegated to a monastic existence. And the Knights of Malta, who were under them, were they're essentially the business arm of the Vatican. They, of which there are 18,000 of them today, globally. 18,000. We have Zuckerman. You've got
Zuckerman, Mort Zuckerman?
Mort Zuckerman.
Is what?
He is a Knight of Malta.
Really? Okay, I didn't know. I didn't know.
No. Lehrman.
Louis Lehrman?
Right. He is a Knight of Malta. You've got Giuliani is a Knight of Malta. You've got Bloomberg through his wife, Susan Brown, out of the Yorkshire, England, who is a Knight of Malta.
What does it mean to be a Knight of Malta?
They are at the highest order of the service to the Pope. And that they essentially carry out the good works to make money for the papacy. And that if there needs to be something done under the cloak of religion, they're the ones who carry out the business.
That's very interesting. Very interesting indeed.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
The Fundi were associated with the ancient landed aristocracy and funds thereof, and so forth. And this is important. And the Vatican and the Catholic and the Jesuits tied together in a certain view
Jesuits
of
came
history that's important for people to know.
I wanted to get to really a book I just heard about, and I heard an interview about the influence of China, who actually mapped the world. And you as a geographer, I thought you'd be. It's called 1421. That's one book. And the second book is 1435. And that the author's name escapes me. Genghis, I think his name is Gavin Genghis, an Englishman. And that what he proved was that the Chinese had a huge fleet.
They did.
Of 1,300 ships.
1,300, a lot of ships,
And they sailed
big
the world.
Ships,
big.
Yeah.
We're talking about 300 feet by 100 feet wide.
Yeah, right,
huge,
right. Yeah,
absolutely huge. 1,300 of them.
Right.
Just
right.
absolutely huge.
Yeah.
They went into the Mediterranean, and they essentially overpowered the Vatican. And they gave the Vatican the word that the Chinese were in town, and they gave them all the charts of the world. And this is what America Vespucci and the Vatican wanted to keep quiet. They wanted to maintain control.
Wasn't there somebody who said they were in America? They had gone to America? Somebody that
The Chinese were active.
There was a thing that came out.
The Chinese were actively
before
involved
Columbus.
in it. They mapped all of America. And that the lie that has been promulgated by the Vatican specifically, that somehow Columbus was the man who, the Knights of Columbus, Columbus has discovered America, which is absolutely a lie.
Just down the hall, just down the street here.
Fine. The point is,
the lights
it's
are
a very
on now.
powerful, Manhattan's a very powerful place.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And that it's got a long history, and I don't discuss certain orders, but certainly in Brooklyn, I don't discuss the orders over there, too.
You don't discuss the orders, but it is interesting to have this kind of a background that informs your thinking.
Well, look, what I'm
and you're
trying
also
to get
interested, if I may, in Teilhard de Chardin, who was a paleontologist and so forth.
Ignatius Loyola,
Yeah.
whose brother was one of the leaders with Columbus, along with the three ships that went to supposedly discover the New World. I mean, he had the maps. He knew exactly, because he had the Chinese maps, where he was going.
Well, that's interesting to me. I don't know about that. That's brand new to me.
There were 6,000 books on this issue. 6,000.
You
very
mean on this
scholarly
Chinese
books.
stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the book 1435, I know you as a geographer.
Is it just out now?
Yes.
And
who's
it in English out there?
His name is Galvin Menges.
Because I didn't know anything.
Yes. Very important.
To me, it's at the. It's not that. It's not.
The Chinese have
It's yet
real,
to be proved.
The Chinese have real fundamental background in the Western Hemisphere. Real. And that they are a force to be contended with. Now, I want to
they're certainly emerging as such that now they hold all our bonds.
Well,
or our treasury bills.
That's paper. All that can disappear overnight. But that's all paper. You print some more paper. We'll go with Keynesian. Pump out the paper like the
turn up the presses,
right?
Mr. Keynes.
Give them a little Weimar paper. And,
well, let's not go that way.
We took off M3.
Yeah, but don't lose track of this thing. This thing you're talking about.
Ignatius Loyola was a military mercenary. He was a Basque. He became a sword for hire, and he was trained in the military arts, and he got captured. He got hit with cannonball between his legs, and he broke both legs, and he spent a year on a bed stretching his legs out. I mean, the guy was but in the time of year, he read all of the Catholic doctrines, and he went to He went to Paris and studied. He took his army with him, and he says, we're going to become the army for the Pope.
Okay. For the Pope?
For the Pope.
All right. Yeah.
So he took his army after, and in 1541, he went to Jerusalem to fight the various papal orders, and to take Jerusalem to give to the Pope. And he was captured. He was brought back to the Pope, and the Pope was impressed, and he made them an order. And they've always been a military order for the Pope from 1541 on. They're not a religious order. They are a military order. They are focused on two things, and that is Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas. And if you know Aristotle, he's got his categories, and the categorical segmentation of knowledge. And if you understand, it was Thomas Aquinas upon his deathbed said, everything in my life has been a lie, and he admitted to that. So the Jesuits take on the lie, and they take on the segmentation of knowledge, and they become the gurus.
What do you mean the segmentation of knowledge?
In other words, they become experts. 13 years of study after basic education. 13 years to become a Jesuit. They become the the absolute expert on segmented areas of knowledge, and then the world comes
Sounds
to
like
that.
academia writ large. I mean, academia is all specialized out. There are very few comprehensive considerations of things.
Right. They're into all aspects of knowledge, and that anybody who wants to know anything goes to them as if they were a guru, and as a guru, that is their church.
They have a reputation of being very rigorous intellectually.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. But they're rigorous like the Green Beret is rigorous.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And to think of them in any other way is to miss the point. They are modeled on Ignatius Loyola, a mercenary, a murderer. So to see him in any other way is to miss the point. So
James Joyce had Daedalus say, history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken. There's a lot of nightmares in the history of the human experience.
Well, look,
what are the trends that still come together, and how do we see the world
I'm running
now?
for the Senate.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Because liberation theology
all right, there you're getting to
has
it.
pretty much upset the apple cart since the 60s, since the 50s, with the bringing on of Fidel Castro, who was a Jesuit co-adjudicator who was put in place and kept and protected. People very close to Castro were Jesuits.
A lot going on in Central America.
Well, the whole liberation theology, which came in, that was all. The father of that was George Tyrrell, who was an Anglican a minister who turned Jesuit in the 1800s. He essentially was the father of modernism. The word modern.
Well, that Mr. Harriman says it was the Scots what invented the modern world and everything in it.
The term modern, the word modern, was George Tyrrell, and he taught at Stonyhurst Jesuit College, and he was the bad boy, the Peck's bad boy of the.
Bad boy. Somebody had to do it, yeah.
Well, but he was the one who essentially was bringing after Vatican I, and creating the basis for Vatican II.
Yeah, yeah. And liberation theology?
Liberation theology, he was the progenitor. He created that, and that it was the group around Le Pence, who was a group of Jesuit radicals, which is sort of a redundancy in words.
You think?
But Jesuit radicals. So that the Father de Chardin, who was born 1881, he lived until 1955. He was very much the active father of liberation theology.
Okay, now
and that he is deployed to China to recapture China.
Well, he was deployed. He was a paleontologist, and he discovered
he was the guru.
Man.
That was his guru. That was his expertise.
What do you mean? That was his cover?
He was the man to go to learn about paleontology. He was
a paleontologist.
He was an expert.
Yeah, he discovered.
He was an expert. They become experts in anything they do.
Well, everybody becomes an expert in something.
You may think
there are very few comprehensive. He was pretty comprehensive with his philosophy. And
the cosmology, yes.
The cosmology, and he had the idea, the phenomenon of man, and he had the mega point, and he had the idea, and he was part of the liberation theology.
He was the father of it.
The father of it, you think. Now, what is that good, bad? What is the message
well,
of
it's
the
the New Age
liberation?
movement. It was the New Age movement.
Right?
It was the liberation theology.
Well,
but liberation theology was a term, and that it was used. So that he was deployed by the Black Pope, the Jesuit general, to go to China to reconstruct the loss that the Jesuits had suffered in 1706 and 1743 under Clement and Benedict, where they got literally just thrown out lock, stock, and barrel. They had been trying to resurrect that relationship that the Chinese had with the Vatican going back to 1435. So
1435,
where they brought the maps. Essentially, we are the Chinese, we're here.
I really want to get chapter and verse.
You're a geographer.
I want you to give me, we'll follow up, and I want to get references and stuff. Yeah, okay, go on.
So, but the point is that the Jesuits were, Francis Xavier, they were hung upside down and really treated, They were butchered, you know, plain and simple.
A lot of butchery in history.
A lot of butchery.
Yeah.
And that
in history.
What happened was Clement and the Benedict had made a mistake by not accepting what's called veneration rights. You know, the dynasties venerated age, they venerated family, and that the Jesuits wanted the the papacy to adopt veneration rights, and that they kicked that around for almost 30 years until 1706. The Pope said, no, we'll have nothing of that. You know, very hubristic, very arrogant, and as a result, the Jesuits got cremated.
But that New Age thing and that thing about Chardin and that, and then he had the phenomena man and he had the idea of the mega point and the idea of liberating, and then it begins to go on over into what is now called Gaia. You got John Lovelock out of England and the Gaia, where you draw away and you see the Earth as an organism, and there's a certain kind of philosophy of liberation wrapped up in that. What is your general feeling about those who are advancing these kind of thoughts about transformation?
I have a case with the CIA. I have a case with the CIA. I wanted to get, when he came back in 1949 from China, CIA debriefed him.
You're talking Chardin.
D. Chardin came back. He lived in Manhattan.
Yeah, he's buried in
up the Culinary Institute of America.
It's now
up at the old novitiate of
St.
Andrews.
We used to do little ceremonies.
They dug up all the old Jesuits and moved them up to Syracuse. But they left him there.
Yeah,
they left him there.
He's in Poughkeepsie, New York, in the great Empire State of New York.
Well, he's in St. Andrews at near Hyde Park.
Yeah.
But what happened was that the CIA, which essentially under Donovan, OSS Donovan.
Culinary Institute. Oh, the CIA, the OSS, that CIA, not the Culinary Institute of America,
Right, but certainly that the Central Intelligence Agency, which was set up by collaboration with General Galen, who was the man who created what we know as the Interpol files, the Gestapo. We essentially brought in through the paperclip program the various Nazis. We used the Vatican rat lines to send the Nazis into South America. We had our Nazi doctors, and so did the Russians have their Nazi doctors. But the point is that the Jesuits were very much a part of that. Very much. Now, and the entire SS was modeled on the Jesuit order. Himmler was there were 9 out of the top leaders of the Reich were practicing Catholics.
We have not yet begun to talk, Mr.
Well,
Strunk, and we've run out of time. Do you realize that? We've run out of time. We've got to do more talk over beer or coffee, or something. Anyway, but we've run out of time, and it's really interesting, all of that, and so. And you're running for district. When's the election? What's the context of that?
September 9th is the Republican primary.
Right.
And certainly, I have 2 court cases. I'm challenging the injury as a result of gerrymandering to all of New York City and Brooklyn specifically.
Yeah, gerrymandering.
And gerrymandering is when you choose your own voters.
Yeah, right.
And that what they've done has caused any competition to be diminished. And that I feel it is essential to get some bottom-up activity on the part of election process.
Very good. I think we ought to run here they come. The credits are coming and everything. Well, that's good. It's good you're doing that, because gerrymandering was done. They, that's something that really being addressed. That's part of your campaign. You got your map here to show how you're dealing with all of that. But you obviously have a wide and Catholic interest in the sense of wide sweeping interest in the human condition. I thank you really very much for coming in. We just sort of scratched the little surface
it's very short,
of everything.
Very short. I mean, it was sort of a broad reach. I wanted to say that basically there are 2 parties left standing, the Masonic global movement and the Vatican global movement and the relationship to the Chinese, so that there's 3 forces in the world, and that all the stories of the Illuminati, all that business is just
Bilderbergers.
It's all just part of the Knights of Malta. Bilderbergers was set up by the Knight of Malta.
Fondi, I think, like that. Okay.
But the Knight of Malta is